Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Post Article Podcast, a way to discuss a topic I've recently written about in an article with a small group of students. Consider this a sort of addendum to the article where we can elaborate on some of the established points and bring up some new ones. Today's episode, we'll talk about my article, The Batman and the Psychology of Scriptwriting, in which I talk about how the Batman movie makes its characters and world feel real by not making things happen for the sake of the plot, but rather by considering the ways that real people would react to the intense situations that the characters are in, and by writing them as such. The article was written for my senior project website, thebenjablog.com. You can find it along with other articles and a bunch of stuff there. The link to the website and the original article will be in the description, and I'd highly recommend that you read that article before watching this video, as we're going to touch on a lot of the ideas discussed in it. That article and this discussion will spoil the movie, so you've been warned if you're still meaning to see it. With that out of the way, though, I have three guests here to talk about The Batman tonight. If you guys want to introduce yourselves quickly and say what you thought about the movie, go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Drew Downey. I loved the movie. I thought Batman was a great return to form for the character. It was amazing adaptation of the character from the comics. Very unique, very well directed by Matt Reeves. Cinematography was awesome. I loved every part of it.
Hi, I'm Francesca. I really liked the movie as well. I thought it was a really good take on Batman from his previous Playboy era. I think the casting was done really well and shocked a lot of viewers. Robert Pattinson's take on it. The movie doesn't feel like it's 3 hours long. You enjoy every minute of it.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I agree with most of the points that have already been said. I loved the movie. I thought the cinematography was amazing. I thought the whole atmosphere was just amazing. It really just felt like a Batman movie. I just feel like this is the most deserving title that it gets is The Batman. I think that's the perfect title. I think the entire movie just encapsulates Batman. I love it.
All right, that's a good way of putting it. And obviously, I'm Nick, right? From the world famous benjablog.com. And I really love the movie. Pretty much the same things that have already been said. All of my opinions you can pretty much see in the article on the website. But now that we've got that out of the way, I have a few open-ended questions to guide our discussion here. So starting off, how did you feel, and this was already kind of touched on a little bit by your answers, but how did you guys feel about this on-screen adaptation of Batman compared to previous ones? Anyone can jump in with anything and build off of anyone's answers. Just shoot.
Okay, I'll go first because I feel like this was most relevant in my answer. I've obviously talked to you guys about this quite a lot, but I loved how and Nick touches on this in his article, how the Batman's backstory is that he's it's tragic. He saw his parents die, and it doesn't make sense for his character, or at least it makes less sense for his character to become this playboy out in the in the public all the time, in the news eye. But it really works for his character to be kind of a recluse, never really seen doing anything, and kind of just being vengeance, trying to just get out his own anger, rather than being all high and mighty, at least at the beginning of the movie.
I feel like this adaptation of Bruce Wayne really focused on his character and his inner struggles, much like the Christian Bale adaptation, but it felt in a more grounded, realistic way, somehow more than, and not more grounded, but in a different way. Because the Nolan trilogy, I would say, is very grounded, but this feels very much inspired and attempted to be a realistic adaptation of the comics as much as possible, rather than a Nolanized version. Not to say that's bad, that's a great trilogy. But I do think that this adaptation of Batman is probably the most comic accurate and the most well done version of the character we've seen on the big screen so far.
Yeah, it's this one, the Nolan trilogy was realistic and but this one feels more like a realistic comic book, like kind of what you were saying. Like I was saying with the whole atmosphere of it, like this is just like, I feel like it just encapsulates Gotham City perfectly. And I feel like the Nolan trilogy had Gotham City, but like they didn't feel like Gotham City. Like I feel like this does, like more so.
Yeah, you bringing up Gotham City is really interesting because it feels almost like the city is a character in this movie with how alive it really is, down from, you really see all aspects of it, from the highest positions of power, like with the DA and the commissioner and the mayor, all the way down to just the common street thugs and even the underbelly of the city. I feel like it really comes to life in this movie more than cities in a lot of other movies do.
I agree with
feel
that.
like
You go.
Okay. I feel like it takes like the crime a lot more seriously too. Like Nick bringing up the street thugs, like that's a lot more, I guess, relatable than like people seeing like, you know, all these big, like elaborate, like bad guys everywhere. Like, but you know, we can relate to seeing rundown cities that are like plagued with just petty theft and like, you know, corruption in that way.
I agree with that a lot. Like it is, like you really do see how awful Gotham has become over the years through all of the corruption of the politicians and the police and all of that, just like forcing all of these like lower class civilians to struggle and be like come with all this unrest and anger towards the leaders in power who are letting this happen and letting all this corruption get to the city and affect all these people.
Yeah, for sure. So, and it's really interesting because you can see in the movie how the city has sort of shaped a lot of the people within it, like the villains, right? There's so many different unique and cool villains in this movie. But I want to know, what was everyone's favorite villain from the movie and what made them stand out to you amongst the others?
Definitely the Riddler.
Yeah, Riddler was the best. Like, you know, Penguin, Falcone, Catwoman, they were all great, but Riddler just like, they really took the character to the next level. Just, he was nothing like his comic book self. They really just changed him. They made him, you know, influence everyone like through the internet and cause like a whole complete uprising in the city through his followers who have been abused through the corruption in the city, just like he has. And you see just like how the masses have just become so upset and easily inspired by him that you just see how absolutely terrible Gotham has become. I just think they did a really good job with Riddler at that point.
Yeah.
I like how Riddler was, like, he was over the top, but he was also realistic at the same time. To where, like, you look at Jim Carrey's Riddler performance, and that's over the top, but that's, like, really unrealistic. But, like, this feels like something that could actually happen in today's world with, like, the online following and, the online presence. And like the serial killer, kind of like the Zodiac killer. Like it just felt very real, which I liked.
Yeah, I touched on that a lot in my article, how it felt so real. And it felt like the way that people reacted to the Riddler was really interesting, because normally in a lot of movies you see that a villain will like put a video out on the internet to publicly threaten the protagonist or something, but it doesn't usually act like it's on the internet, right? It kind of stays in a vacuum, or people are, if anything, people are just like, oh my God, that's
like
crazy.
Certain people are supposed to see it.
Right, exactly. And this movie really takes it to a level where you find out, however long into the movie, that he's actually gained this sort of cult following of people that ultimately, once he's in prison by the end of the movie, they are the ones that carry out his plan. There's like 10 or 20 people who are really devoted to his cause. And of course they would be, because again, he represents the product of what was wrong with Gotham. He is what has become of that.
I love how they did the Riddler in this movie because, you know, it's not like a classic action movie where it relies on like, you know, it has obviously like really well thought out fight scenes, but it doesn't have like it doesn't rely on the same level of I guess it like direct protagonist on antagonist violence. Instead, a lot of that isn't violence, but, you know, the Riddler isn't directing his violence towards the Batman for the majority of the film. You know, he's going after other people. So it's interesting to see that take, like, not them being, you know, like Batman obviously opposing Riddler, but not necessarily the same way around.
And that really like helps to bring out the detective side of Batman, because you see Batman using his physical strength to fight people, but you also see him using his mental strength when he's working with Commissioner Gordon to figure out the Riddler's riddles. And it just like Franny was saying, it's not like a lot like head-on like conflict. It's more like mental and like Batman trying to figure it out, which I like.
I agree with that. I think Riddler is just like I think Riddler's just like the perfect test for Batman to test his mental capacity, his physical strength. Just like the puzzles in the beginning where he was figuring out the little cipher, and he was like, what if the whole key is the partial key? And he found the word spelled out in the full key. And that was just like, you know, just things like that in the thumb drive, just showing how Batman can deduce things using his intelligence so quickly on the fly. It's just like a really good display of his mental attributes.
Yeah. And sorry, Nick.
No, you go. It's okay.
I'm going to relate this to Marvel movies because that's where I have more, I guess, superhero knowledge. But, you know, my favorite part of Marvel movies has always been like the suspense aspect or like mysterious aspect, like you see in what is it? And is it in Civil War where they have like, you know, all the past Winter Soldiers and you see them all dead, like you thought they would be alive but then they're dead. You know, it's those like those instances where it's like something you didn't think was going to happen. Like, you know, for me it was never about like big fight scenes, and I think the Batman uses like the mystery aspect to its advantage really well, because everyone loves a good mystery film, like, you know, figuring out what's happening along the way. And it's not one, you know, mystery. It's figuring out both Batman's past, you know, as his father, like figuring out if he was actually a good guy, you know, if he was corrupt, and also figuring out the Riddler's past, you know, where he came from and why he's doing all this. So I think that's really interesting.
Right, and tracing it back to the Riddler a little bit, I think it's really interesting how it can almost, a villain like that can almost get you more involved in the movie, because when it's a physical fight scene, right, it's like, oh, I hope the Batman wins. But when it's like a mental game, when it's specifically a riddle like that, you can almost play along. You can be like, oh, I wonder what the answer is. I think it's this. I think it's this. And I mean, we obviously couldn't like go up to a car and find a thumb drive stuck into it, but I think it's really interesting how it sort of lets you play along and be the detective. It immerses you that much more in the protagonist than a normal movie would.
And I love it towards the well, I guess not the end of the movie, but once the Riddler is in Arkham Asylum, you know, he says to Batman, I could never do this on my own. You know, I was just the brains. You were the physical aspect. And it's so true, because earlier in the film, all we had seen of the Riddler was like videos of him. You never really like see him. It's just his threats and his, I guess, quote, work that he's done to like the other politicians. And I guess him using Batman to like be the one that like, I think he sees himself represented through Batman, like being at all the scene of the crime and stuff.
Right, for sure. And just Sam and Drew, I think you guys mentioned the Dark Knight trilogy earlier, so I want to pose this question. Who does everyone think is better? Because everyone for, 10 years now, 12 years now, has praised Heath Ledger's Joker as amazing as he is. And we're starting controversy here.
It's a tough question.
So, Riddler or the Joker?
Okay, wait. Let me go first. So, I'm gonna pull a whoops card and say I've actually never seen the Nolan trilogy. So
hashtag whoops.
Right, so you
whoops
should go
alert.
first on this.
Whoops alert.
Yeah, whoops alert. I'm a fake. I've
Hashtag
only seen
whoops
the
alert.
Batman. It's the only DC film that I've seen others, but come on, which ones are good?
Ooh.
Okay, you guys can say now what you want to say about the other ones.
Thanks for sharing.
Well,
that,
there's this movie called Suicide Squad.
Yeah, right.
The 2016 version, yeah.
It's a piece of art, right?
Right. All right.
Okay,
you guys want to take this
going
away?
back to Nick's original question, Joker in Dark Knight, that was amazing. Very similar to how Riddler is posed in this movie, where how he's playing the mind games, he's playing with the Batman. He sees it as a game. He sees Batman as somewhat of his equal, and it's more like the classic villain, like you're just like me. We're not like these other guys. But I do think Joker in Dark Knight was a bit better of a villain. Just purely writing wise, I think Riddler is better, but I think Heath Ledger brought so much to that performance that it just can't be ignored. I think he's the best.
I will say I do I don't love, but I think the whole pipeline from like playing a Batman villain to like kind of going like insane, like having mental problems afterwards is really interesting for all the actors that have to like go through that. Like, there are articles saying that Paul Dano like actually had like some difficulties after playing the Riddler. It is like he's a crazed character. Like he is very scary, just like the lack of empathy he has.
Putting yourself in that mindset.
Not as devoted as Jared Leto to Morbius, though.
Oh, absolutely. Cinema.
But like, and we can relate to it, especially in this like era of technology, because we've seen what can happen in like online uprisings, like whether it be like how there was the group of conservatives that stormed the Capitol, and the constant online threats. Like it's so threatening because you don't know who's behind it, and there's either so many people on the internet that you're always going to have a following of some sort. You're always going to be able to touch someone because there are other people you're able to reach other people as crazy as you and that have the same ideas as you. So it's definitely very like it's able to feel very threatening because we can all we all know what the trolls are, I guess.
So you're a Riddler fan, Franny.
I'm not a Riddler fan, Drew.
Riddler enjoyer.
I'm scared of Riddler. I'm a Riddler enjoyer because the movie was really good. But
Joker fans versus Riddler enjoyers.
No, but I'm just saying he's a terrifying character. Like,
no, I feel
he is. Yeah, that especially the scene where Batman is like getting progressively more like angry, and like he's like punching the wall, or not the wall, the window, and Riddler just starts singing Ave Maria. Like that just came out of nowhere, and I think that was just so amazing. I was like I was laughing during that scene, but not because I thought it was funny, just because it was like so good. I was like, oh my god, like, you know.
Yeah, it's my favorite scene in the movie.
I don't want this to sound corny, but you can relate Riddler to like a lot of online scary incels.
No, that's
like,
true. And I think that's what they were going for.
Absolutely. There are so
Absolutely.
many online forums where you can see people like spewing this same terrifying rhetoric that it's not really that far-fetched.
Right. And I think going back to the Joker a little bit, I think both of them have the potential to be some of Batman's best villains because they form such a good dichotomy with him. There's the whole idea of Batman is order and the Joker is chaos. And then this whole idea that the Batman is a detective and the Riddler makes riddles specifically for him. And I feel like Jim Carrey is the Riddler. That's obviously going to be goofy. But having, like Franny just said, having that online presence and like it's so rooted in realism that it's horrifying in a sense if you really think about it, because it's like this is real. And you think about a lot of modern revolutions, they aren't planned in person, they're planned online, like the January 6th Capitol thing, like the Arab Spring. A lot of this stuff is planned online, so this has so much grounding in our own world, and that's one thing I really took away from the movie is just how real it felt.
Very true.
But moving away from the Riddler for a minute, to move on, the Riddler, Penguin, Falcone, they aren't the only villains in the movie, right? Or they aren't the only opposition to Batman. There's a lot of government corruption that he faces. So what is your opinion on like the heavy amount of government corruption that's depicted in the movie, and who did you want to root for in the end? How did that complicate things for you?
I think that, I don't know, I mean, being in Batman's position and learn that his father was not like the straight edge, like he was also corrupt, he was also involved in this, like really like shakes up how, like you can't just view it as such black and white, like you can't, I feel like you gotta acknowledge that there's corruption, but you can like root for Batman, I guess.
Yeah, I think that it's really hard to like it's really hard to trust the politicians, like the new elected mayor at the end of the movie says, like it's not just about rebuilding the town, it's about rebuilding trust. But you like relating it to like our world, whereas we might not have like say like a distinct mob, but we do have very rich people who have a lot of influence, and so you're thinking like, yes, this one woman may have good intentions, but like how many people behind her might not, and still able to like pull some strings. And there's like the connection between like what we think are supposed to be like fake villains, I guess, like the Penguin and the Riddler, like they're made up characters, and how they're tied into like real things like government and politicians, and you can easily swap those out for other people that help like influence our like government and stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I think the villains, as in the corruption of the movie and the politicians and the leaders and all of that, I think that serves as a great opposition to Batman, to Bruce, to show what he needs to not be, what he needs to stand up against, and show Gotham that there's more than this. There are better people who can lead. There are better people who should lead, like the new mayor, like Bruce, like what Bruce is probably going to be in the next movie. Like Bruce, like how Bruce is at the end of the movie when he's helping the victims of the flood out. He's being a beacon of hope while the past leaders were abusing their power and utilizing corruption in the city to benefit themselves while leaving all of the poor people to just like squander in the streets.
Yeah, I also love that change in Batman's character. Like at the beginning, He's always saying he's vengeance. He's not really helping the city. He has very selfish intentions of just trying to get his anger out, trying to distract himself. But then he does make that arc to actually be a hero. He doesn't really start out a hero. He just starts out like as a vigilante. So that's really like interesting to see. And again, like contrasts with his past, like playboy hero, like always does good. What Nick said is the order. He is an order at the beginning of the movie.
And going off of that, like the whole like character arc, at the beginning of the movie, you see, when he goes to save that guy from the criminals, the guy says, "Oh, please don't hurt me," because he just instills fear in everybody. And at the end of the movie, when that lady's being rescued and she's about to get lifted up, Batman puts her down and she doesn't let go of him because she like feels safe. And like he like looks at her and like acknowledges that, and then she lets her go, and then she goes up. Like that just like shows the amazing character arc that is in the movie. And yeah,
I love that scene. Like that gave me like that made me smile so hard when I watched that. I was like, this is a complete character arc. Like this is such a good movie. This is cinema.
Yeah, I talked about that in the article a lot, where he moves to be, because you see in the movie, right, you have people like the Riddler, and it's like, okay, you're crazy. And then you have the government, who isn't even really doing anything. They're corrupt. They're in the palm of the mob. So the city, Batman really needs to step up, because what he was doing before was being vengeance for himself. And now what he's doing is he's stepping up and he's being the symbol of justice for the city. And I thought that was an amazing character arc for a character who feels like is the same a lot of the time. But I feel like it was a really good way to do like an origin story kind of Batman arc. But we're talking about the ending now. So this is our final question. Just what is your overall impression of the movie's very bittersweet ending? Because, the city's flooded. They say many times, like, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But like we just talked about, Batman has this character arc, and the only real good thing that comes out of the end of the movie is his progression. And he's going to be like a better symbol of justice. So what is your impression of that bittersweet ending, and how well do you think the movie did with its realism there?
I think the ending was perfect for a movie like this. I think Batman got where he needed to be as a character. He went from vengeance and selfishness and just anger and rage to becoming a symbol of hope and justice, like how Batman is usually portrayed and thought of by fans. He became Batman. He went from vengeance and he became Batman. And I think that's just the perfect arc for him, because I remember watching the last scene and seeing him just zoom away on the bat cycle, and he looks down, then he looks up, and then you hear the engine roar, and he's on his mission to be a better person and help the city. And I just loved it. It was a perfect ending.
Yeah, like Drew said, they don't use the like corny line of like, I am Batman. It's I'm vengeance. And Drew said he then becomes Batman, which I think is like a really fitting way to describe it. I appreciated the ending. I think it was a fitting way, like, not to end it like too like hopeful. I'm not hopeful, too light, because that's not what the movie was about. It was about like addressing all the darkness that was within Gotham. And, it is going to be like a long road to be able to fix that.
Yeah, it's a very like realistic movie, and the ending matches that realistic tone. Like it like not everything's going to end super happily. Like obviously you can see the good parts of it, but overall the city's still flooded, and the movie doesn't shy away from showing that like bad part of the ending.
Also, setting up the ending like that sets us up for like a really good way to introduce the second movie. Like, it's not too clear. If they were to do a second movie, which I'm pretty sure they are, you know, there's still things to be fixed. There's still crime. And like they say, there's, with all this, you know, with the flooding and with Falcone gone, there's going to be a power grab. You see this shot of the Penguin. You realize he is still a villain. Yes, he didn't do many directly evil things, but he was participating in it and he had knowledge of it. He still has the power to be a threatening villain, because he is sort of the next in line after Falcone. You know, he's the next leader, and he has the best opportunity to be able to have, you know, all these former mobsters in his grasp doing what he says.
Yeah, for sure. So that sequel, I'm sure, is going to be great. Hopefully, I don't know when it's coming out, but it will be awesome if it's anything close to the quality of this, especially with what was teased at the end, like you said, with the Penguin. And then I said spoiler alert, I can say with the Joker tease at the
Mr.
end.
Freeze better be in that sequel.
Yeah.
We're talking about
the polka dot man. And
if we're talking about
Condiment
the dichotomy of characters, Mr. Freeze would be the perfect character because he lost his wife, and Bruce understands the pain of losing family members. So
Okay, really quick question. It's a yes or no. How do we feel about the new Joker? Yeah, or like yes or no? Do we like it so far or not? I personally, I'm excited. I think it is a future.
We'll see. I think we'll see. But
yeah.
Yeah, Drew, yes or no?
Eh.
Eh. All
I
right.
think we need to see more of him. But
Well,
we'll see, yeah.
I agree. I think he has potential, but that is going to be a wrap on our first episode of Post Article Podcast. I'd like to thank Sam Riccio, Drew Downey, and Franny Andrews for coming on and talking with me tonight. I really appreciate it. Again, this discussion was based on an article written for thebenjablog.com. For articles, interviews, and videos on a bunch of cool stuff, you can head over to thebenjablog.com. Any support is very much appreciated, so be sure to swing by if you get a chance. You can follow the site's Instagram page at thebenjablog for any updates on whenever new content is released. As for now, though, that's all I have for you. This is Nick Benjamin of thebenjablog.com, and thanks for listening.